This is the Big Sports Show on the Big 550 KTRS.
Are you ready?
From the Blues and SLU to the Cardinals and Mizzou.
You don't just barge into the booth when I'm on the air.
This is the Big Sports Show.
Maybe I could be like an announcer, like a color man. You know how I always make those interesting comments during the game?
The Big Sports Show starts now.
Hey, let's do this.
Here's Brendan Wiese on the Big 550 KTRS.
Good evening, everybody. It's the Big Sports Show on the Big 550 KTRS. Brendan Wiese, sports columnist from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Ben Fredrickson. We've got a busy night of what we didn't think would be golf talk when we began the day, but with all of the events of the last 6 to 8 to 10 hours, it's kind of a necessity right now to dig into all of this. Ben, good evening, sir.
Good evening, man. Yeah, I was stunned along with everybody else this morning reading the news, and been kind of continuous updates throughout the day. And credit to you, man. You put together a heck of a show tonight talking about this and talking to some folks who know a lot about the way these things work. And I would argue that we're going to have some of the most thoughtful commentary, not from myself, but from our guests here this evening, and what a great crew you've assembled here in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it'll be fun here, Ben. We'll have Skip Berkmeyer with me and you later on in the hour, but we start the program with the former president of the United States Golf Association and what was going to be a time for him to celebrate next week as he set up the event, locked in LA Country Club for the USGA here in 2023. Our good friend Tom O'Toole is kind enough to spend a few minutes with us here on the Big 550 KTRS. Tom, it's always a pleasure, sir. How are you?
Brendan, always good to be with you. Ben, thanks for having me. Good to connect with you guys.
It's well, thanks for taking a few minutes, Tom, because obviously the news of the day has everybody kind of floored. I mean, we've learned a little more as the afternoon went on, but Tom, just your initial reaction to the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan electing to merge with LIV Golf and their public investment fund.
Well, it is the threshold issue or item in sports right now. And I guess, guys, I'd start by saying, there's a volume here. We could do multiple evenings on your show, and you really drill down into the complexity of this over the last year and a half or 2 years. So I think the best way to handle it is probe where you'd like to probe. Glad to come back some other time, but you got other guests to get to, so I'm glad to give my perspective. But to start with, to answer your question, look, I don't want to sound like I was clairvoyant or I'm Henry Kissinger, but I've said for the past probably 3 or 4 months, and I was at the memorial event last weekend with my good friends and clients of Worldwide Technology. I've always said that I thought this was there would be a meeting of the minds at some point. I didn't tell you it was going to be this week or before the U.S. Open, but I thought that for a lot of reasons, which I'm glad to get into, that these groups had to come together. Now, it's not popular in a lot of walks that they've done so, but it looks like they got a deal, and this controversy that's really distracted and harmed the elite game. Now, let's make one point for your listeners, which are really important, and they're the people that are slogging and playing golf in this community and beyond every day. Golf is flourishing. It's had its problems at the elite level, i.e. the PGA Tour. But other than that, I mean, everywhere you go, where is golf not flourishing? And clubs are busy, and there's a lot of activity. We can thank COVID for that. But golf is really in a good stead. Our elite game had some issues, and it looks like, at least from a lot of people's perspective, those were resolved today.
So, Tom, do you feel like then, as you had maybe an idea this could be coming around the corner, do you feel like there was a moment or an event that sort of forced Jay Monahan's hand, at least in the moment, to play ball with the Saudi Public Investment Fund and LIV Golf?
Well, I think there was a series of moments. I've said over the last few months. I spend a little time in Florida in the winter. I'm not retired, certainly. Most of you know that. But Ed Hurley, who's a member of the PGA Tour Policy Board and a prominent New York lawyer and a good friend of mine, he kind of explained to me the legal intricacies. I didn't do a lot of research about what the claims are. We know there was antitrust claims. We know there's been an investigation by the DOJ. But, we know that LIV and the PGA Tour were involved in a litigious fight. I came to the conclusion that the PGA Tour had LIV on the run a little bit legally. And we know that not only in our country, but there was rulings in Europe that caused you to draw the same conclusion. I spent my life practicing law, and, when you have your opponent on the run, then is there a chance that gives you leverage to reach a resolution or to strike some accord? And I think that's likely part of what happened here. Look, the Saudi prince was never going to be exposed to the U.S. legal system. He wasn't going to expose his assets. He wasn't going to be subject to the discovery rules in federal court in the U.S. and be deposed. So when the PGA Tour got favorable rulings there, that put them a little bit on their back heels. Now, where the tide turns, I think, from what I've read today, is there's a serious investment being made in what I'll call, pardon the legal reference, but we call in the corporate world new co, which is new company. So there's a new entity that's been formed. There's a substantial investment made to NewCo by the Public Investment Fund. And from what I'm hearing, that has a B in front of it and a lot of them. So that's a good thing for another entity that has been had to spend a lot of money and raise the ante on their events. Now, yes, they want to pass some of that along to their title sponsors, but the PGA Tour covered a lot of the delta on these elevated events. They just built a $50 million plus building in Ponte Vedra, Florida. They got a lot of legal expenses that have occurred nationally and internationally. Now they just got an infusion of a capital investment by an investor that makes up for a lot of wrongs or a lot of sins.
Tom, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate your perspective on this. I've got a couple questions. First one, this isn't the first time and won't be the last that two kind of groups with competing interests decide they're better off throwing in together, burying their differences, and kind of letting bygones be bygones. That's not all that surprising. In fact, former President Donald Trump predicted that's how this was eventually going to end. What was unique about this was the amount of kind of morality arguments that were brought up on behalf of the PGA, the calling out of the blood money, their words, and really the shade, the kind of reputation hits that were thrown from the PGA toward some of these guys who've left. Did the speed with which this was resolved, considering some of the animosity that seemed to be there, did that surprise you how quickly it was resolved? And was that, do you think, just for show on behalf of the PGA in order to try to strike a deal?
Well, Ben, I think you focus in on one of the really critical or hotbed subjects with this announcement, and that is, I spent a lifetime in disputes, and things you say in disputes against your opposing party can many times come back to haunt you, or there's a day of reckoning with these. I think if you go on, I'm not a social media guy, as you guys can imagine, but I did look on the internet a little bit and try to prepare for your wonderful show tonight to get a reaction. And the reaction you're seeing is, wait a minute, how does the commissioner walk this back in, or how does he get the toothpaste back in the tube after some of the things he said? And my opinion doesn't matter. John Q. Public's doesn't matter, except he may or may not continue to be a fan. But these PGA Tour players who put a stake in the ground and supported the tour and said, John Rahm, how much money do I need? I said to my wife. Rory McIlroy, who stood up on behalf of this tour, many of those people tonight or this afternoon and for the rest of the week are going to say, wait a minute now. We put our eggs in our basket. We said we weren't turning back. We said we weren't going to go to the table with them, and now we did. So that's going to have to be walked back by the commissioner, and, we'll see. I heard some of the sound bites that he had today, and things change, and, they were serving to these types of objections or concerns, but you focus in on one of the real points here, and I'll just tell you one other thing on that. So now that they've got this resolution with all the tours, LIV, the DP World Tour, which was known as the European Tour, the PGA Tour, and what about all the money that these guys got? Now, is there some kind of retribution? The guys that stood by the PGA Tour said, okay, wait a minute now. We hung in here. So where's this coming back to us now? I think
you answered my second question, because my second question was going to be, what about these guys who planted their flag and said, I'm pro PGA? The guys who left got, tens of millions of dollars, and now they're all going to be back in the same boat. And guys who thought they were doing the right thing standing by the PGA were finding out today on Twitter that they were playing for the same two groups at the same time now.
That's right. Why didn't I go?
Right.
I stayed here to protect the enterprise. I didn't take $140 million if that's what Dustin Johnson got, and I stayed true to the mothership. Now where am I? So it's a pertinent question. It's one that's going to be vetted, and it's a funny day, but I do think the long-term solution here, because when you got a guy like Brooks Koepka play well in the Masters and then win the PGA, now we were going to debate, was he going to be on the Ryder Cup? Well, if he got the necessary amount of points, which they published ahead of time, does the PGA have a legal obligation if he was one of the top 6 point getters? Or if he wasn't that, was Zach Johnson going to pick him? This thing just compounded. It just kept coming and brewing more and more that, I just thought at some point for the elite game that they were going to try to reach a resolution. That said, you've hit on the other term, and that is, why did the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour get into a company with the Saudis? People are going to object about that, particularly those who lost family members and lives in 9/11, and they're still experiencing a hangover of that. Should they have done that? That there will be criticism about that. But then, the other side of that argument is, gosh, the three of us and all your listeners couldn't count the American businesses that do business in Saudi Arabia. So, where do you draw the line? But all these things are going to be subject to talk radio, print media, social media. There's going to be a lot of explaining to do. And when Colin Morikawa wakes up and says, yeah, this is what I want to do, I want to get my morning news on Twitter. I mean, there's a lot going on, but I guess I can't wait to get home and watch the Golf Channel tonight.
Oh man, they were live about 8 hours straight today, Tom. It was was incredible.
I was trying to settle one of these disputes all day today, so I didn't get my my arms really rolled up in it. But I had my 24-year-old son who's working at Price Waterhouse in Chicago, Zach, text me saying, Dad, did they really make this deal? So that he was keeping me apprised somewhat, but interesting time in the game, no question.
Tom O'Toole, former president of the United States Golf Association, with us here on the Big 550 KTRS. The news of the day, the PGA Tour merging with LIV Golf. Tom, are you surprised as we hear, you mentioned him, big names that had no idea, Colin Morikawa, one of the biggest in the sport, but that they were like, that Jay Monahan was able to keep this circle so tight and so small that I guess if we are to believe the reports, that even the biggest names in the sport like Tiger and Rory didn't even know this was going on.
Well, again, it's a strategy in a dispute resolution that people employ different rings of inclusion and others. It's hard to believe that the guys that were his biggest advocates weren't apprised, but that seems to be what the reports are. I can even tell you that I've heard the top colonels or lieutenants or whatever you want to call them of the PGA Tour were not aware of it. Maybe some members of the PGA Tour Policy Board were, but that's the way Monahan played it. I'm sure that was his call. He thought that was the best way to strike a deal with the Saudi governor Yasser, and by keeping it in a closed environment. So, again, the next few days are going to uncover a lot of that, which I'm sure there's going to be hurt feelings and people that stood up and said, well, I should have been in the know in light of the fact how I've been an advocate for the PGA Tour. So, again, Jay Monahan look, he's a capable guy, so he's going to have some explaining to do. He's already started it, but it's not going to stop for the foreseeable future.
And Tom, Jay Monahan had to know that he'd get serious blowback for this, right? I mean, he was walking into this certainly with the clarity of what was going to come today when this news broke.
Well, he'd be living in a cave or under a rock if he didn't. I've not been to any of those PGA Tour meetings, but my understanding from the players that I've talked to that have been there, they've been very contentious and heated in a lot of assertions. So, yeah, I'm sure he had to know. I can only conclude at this juncture, 12 hours into this announcement or whatever it is, that this, again, the investment, the capital that's being advanced by the Public Investment Fund into this new co is so substantial that it just corrects and makes a lot of things whole and puts the PGA Tour and its affiliate companies on firmer or better ground financially. And so maybe that was the motivating thing. I suspect that, again, in the coming hours and days, I suspect some of this will be unfolded.
Tom, you're underscoring an important part of this, and a lot of this hemming and hawing and morality debates really gives way at the end of the day to the bottom line and the money. And this is what they've got to be thinking, is that the long-term outcome of merging will be better for their business than whatever lumps they're going to take in today and tomorrow and the next weeks and months, and even bigger and better than what the players are going to throw at them. What do you think that outcome could be? I mean, this investment, what could it allow the PGA to do when it gets billions with a B money from this merger? What do you think is going to be on their list of things that they're looking to do to show eventually over time that it was not only the right thing for their business, but for their standing and the future of the PGA?
Well, yeah, right. Is it a better environment for their business and for the entertainment entity that we know as the PGA Tour or, professional or elite golf? Look, there's no question, I think, that, the effort that was put forth here by the Saudis was to improve their image. We've all heard the vernacular sports washing, and they are trying to improve their image internationally, and we've seen it in other sports. It's well documented. Well, when they got into this one, they got almost immediately embroiled in a pretty significant legal quagmire not only in Europe but in the U.S. And so I suspect that the Saudi Arabians said, well, how has this really improved us? Because all we are is we've got this tour that we wanted to be part of. That's really what they wanted originally. They wanted to be a title sponsor. They wanted the PGA Tour to come to Saudi Arabia, maybe multiple events that they could sponsor. And the tour or Jay didn't want to give them that. And so that started to spiral down at this, the middle finger and don't tell us, we can Don't think you can out-leverage me. But as this thing evolved on, the Saudis had to say, well, besides a lot of money we're spending, well, where is this really improving us? It's not. And so I think that caused them to try to say, well, maybe there is a way to reach some common ground here. But it's, I think, we touched on it, that the economics of this are so substantial that it's going to improve an environment. Look, the PGA Tour reacted to this. How did they react? When they started losing players, when you really look at it, this is an aside, I don't want to digress, but, the LIV really didn't get any prominent players, maybe other than Cam Smith. Brooks Koepka, thought was broken and down and gone. Johnson was in the twilight of his career, really, in his interest of what he's doing. He's won 24 times. But, all these other guys that they got, Nicholson and Poulter and McDowell, these guys weren't in the prime of their careers, and some of the other guys they got were not the guys that were most popular. So they never really got to the next level of players. But the fact is, what did the PGA Tour? They reacted by saying, okay, we got to up the ante. So instead of a $12 million person in an elite event, it's got to go to 20. Or an $8 million event has got to go to 12. Well, who was paying for that? The title sponsors, not in the short term, it was the tour. And so they did that to retain the players, right? John Rahm's comment, how much money, I asked my wife, do we need to have? So they retained guys by upping the ante and making the ground here more fertile to stay. That all was at a price. And okay, so where were they going to recover the price? I think they recovered it today.
Yeah, that's well said. Tom O'Toole, the former president of the USGA, with us. And Tom, as we tie a bow around this, I did want to mention is, again, certainly a celebratory time for you. Every time around this time of year, with Father's Day around the corner, it means the U.S. Open. And Tom, next week at LA Country Club, that was the last U.S. Open that you set up while you were in charge, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the 24 Open was Pinehurst, but, we had such a partnership with Pinehurst, and now look what we've done. We've moved a whole part of our staff there. So technically I announced 24 too, but the 23 was the significant one. And I said when I retired, and this is not about Tom O'Toole, believe me, let me make this perfectly clear. We had a guy at LA Country Club, Dick Shorts, who you've probably read in the media as the guy that's led the charge there and convinced the club that the USGA really tried to court and cultivate over a period of time. The USGA reacts to invitations. We don't really seek clubs for events, but that doesn't mean there wasn't always some behind-the-scenes backdoors of Congress negotiation. And I will tell you, the USGA, the U.S. Open was last in L.A. in 1948. Hogan won at Riviera. We did go to Torrey Pines and, of course, the famous Tiger and Morocco playoff in 08 and 09, and then we went back there in 20. But we hadn't been to L.A. I said it was the most significant U.S. Open announcement literally in 75 years because of what was hanging in the balance. The USGA could come and host our national championship at this wonderful club, a club that really resisted or said thanks but no thanks for literally 75 years. So again, that wasn't my skills or my ability to do it. I was on the ride with Dick Shorts, and it's a monumental thing, I think, for golf, and to bring the U.S. Open to Beverly Hills and Hollywood, pretty interesting. And I think your listeners, if they view in on NBC, will see a really kind of different U.S. Open presentation that's set up, and one that will have a lot of Hollywood and Beverly Hills splash. So 2023, exciting time for the USGA and the U.S. Open Championship.
Well, I can't wait for that next week, Tom, and congratulations on getting to be able to celebrate that next week as we all get to witness, like you said, a very different-looking United States Open, and hopefully this cloud of the news of today will have passed, at least by next week, and we can enjoy some golf and the third major on the golf calendar. Tom O'Toole
I'm
Jr.
sure
with
there'll be
us.
some discussion around it next week, but let's hope they focus on the championship. But I will say one thing. Thanks for covering this, because even your listeners that may be kind of a remote golfers are interested in this, because I would say that what people used to say to me when you spoke in the USGA, what did they ask you? Two things. How did you get there? How did I get to be president? And then what's my favorite course? Since I retired and since this happened, I will tell you everywhere I go, what do you think about LIV? What is its longevity? Where does this end up? So this is a thing that even casual people are interested in.
Yep.
So good on you guys for getting to the bottom of this tonight and going forward.
Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Have a good night, Ben. Brandon, good to see you. Thank you.
You got it. Thanks so much. Tom O'Toole Jr. with us, former president of the United States Golf Association.